talked about Imam Hassan al-Islam handing over the rule. But he didn't just simply say, okay, now you're the ruler. You know, he laid out conditions. It was a conditional transfer of power. And he didn't hand over the Khilafah, because the Khilafah, as Rasulullah ﷺ said, was for 30 years, and that 30 years ended with Imam Hassan al-Islam. So I want to go over the conditions that he laid out, which also reiterates what we're saying here. Working? Did you give it a title? Did you give it a title?
Sunday talk with today's date.
Okay, that's fine. That'll work for now. You keep it. Yeah, so if something goes wrong in the middle. No problem. Just sit right there. Yeah. So, there are people today who want to come out and say, oh, no, there weren't any conditions, which is just plain stupid. If you even think about it, just intuitively. If you look at the Hadith in Bukhari, it's clear and Muslim that, Muawiyah radhiyallahu sent the blank paper, said, you lay out the conditions. And there were, and Bukhari says there were conditions, but he doesn't say what the conditions were. They had a long discussion and there were conditions, and they agreed. But we find that through other narrations, which are also in the books of the Sunni scholars. Nothing I'm saying is coming from any scholar that's Shia or anything else. So the first condition he laid out was that you will follow the Quran and the Sunnah and the way of the Khulafā Rashidin. Here, before we get into this, it's important to understand that the right of the Khilafah was Imam Hassan al-Islam. Muawiyah radhiyallahu had no right to the Khilafah or to the rule. Which is again why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that this son of mine is the master of men. Inna ibni hada sayyidukum. He is your master. And because of him, two large groups will come to terms to peace. Two large groups of Muslims will come to peace. To give up your own rights is a sign of decency. Somebody violates my rights. Somebody violates my rights, and I forgive them and I give up my rights. That's decency. Somebody violates the rights of my beloved, and I tell him, oh, no problem. That's hypocrisy. And this is the difference in what Imam Hassan al-Islam did and what Imam Hussein al-Islam did. They follow the same rule, but the conditions and the situation were different. And because of that, because Imam Hassan al-Islam is handing over the rule with conditions to preserve the rights of Allah and His Messenger. Imam Hussein al-Islam knew that Yazid had no intentions of fulfilling the rights of Allah and His Messenger. So this is the huge difference. And why, even though both of them are following the same rule, did what in appearance is the opposite. Because there are also people who say that, Imam Hussein al-Islam was against this truce or this peace that Imam Hassan al-Islam brought about, which is also a big lie. And I'll come to that point later on, inshallah. So the first condition is you follow the Quran and the Sunnah. You will rule according to the Quran and the Sunnah and the way of the Khulafā Rashidin. Which also tells us that Muawiyah radhiyallahu is not amongst the Khulafā Rashidin. Because if he was Khulafā Rashidin, then his way would be the way of the Khulafā Rashidin, automatically. without having to specify that. That's what I'm getting to. All right. So, the problem comes with us now because the term Khalifa has been so abused and misused that most of us, think of Khalifa as the leader, as any leader, which is not, or any Islamic leader, which is not the case. This is why Rasulullah specified that the Khilafah is for 30 years, after which will come the age of the cruel monarchy, after which is the tyrants, which is what we're in now today. But if you look at all of these kings, this monarchy, all of them refer to themselves as Khalifa. Every single one of them. Starting from Banu Umayyah all the way to the last Ottoman king. All of them refer to themselves as Khalifa, even though the reality is that they're not. If I look at Khilafah, a Khalifa is someone who's representing someone else and fulfilling So, Khalifa, again, is someone who is representing someone else. He is appointed by someone else. And we see this in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say when He's creating Adam al-Islam? Before He creates Adam al-Islam, what does He say to the angels? وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. And remember when your Lord said to the angels that I'm going to place a vice-chair, a Khalifa on the earth. Okay? So vice-chair, again, is someone who's representing someone else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Dawood al-Islam as Khalifatul fil ard, Khalifa on the earth. We know Rasulullah is Khalifatul fil alameen. He is a Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to all of creation. He is the representative of Allah to all of creation. He is fulfilling the laws of Allah throughout creation. Khalifa is not someone who takes power by force. Because again, it's given to him. We again coming back to Adam alayhi salam. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making this declaration, Adam alayhi salam hasn't done anything. He hasn't even taken his first breath. So it's not like he did something to acquire it or to attain this khilafah. Allah gave it to him. If you look at all of the prophets who were vice-chairants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of them, the prophethood is not something that, I pray this many times and I do this many sajda and I do this and I do this and suddenly, it's given. When I look at the Khulfa Rashidin, and here I'm specifying because they are the only Khulfa Rashidin to this point, Imam Mahdi will also be amongst the Khulfa Rashidin. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and Imam Hassan, radiallahu anhum. Righteous. Yeah. So Khulfa Rashidin are the rightly guided caliphs. When I look at the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, again, it's not something he took by force. We've talked about how he became the Khalifa. Meetings going on after the passing of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam amongst the Ansar. He goes there, because they're trying to figure out who's going to lead. He says, look, choose one of these two, Umar or Abu Ubaidah. Those two said, well, we choose you. And everybody says, well, we also agree to you. Yeah. So it's not like he brought an army and took it by force. Umar radiallahu, what happens? Abu Bakr radiallahu suggests, make him your Khalifa. And Abu Bakr radiallahu, again, he is Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. in his own, I guess, mindset, he has no authority other than what is given to him. We look at, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are those who say that he had no authority, but they're talking about any personal authority, which is totally wrong because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the authority. Then the rest of us, we say, no, he had authority, but we understand the authority is given by Allah, and he was given all the authority. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's authority is because of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we look at the Khulfa Rashideen, these are representatives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fulfilling the will of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam amongst the people. So the objective of the Khalifa is to make sure that the rights of all of creation are given to them at the expense of themselves. The objective of the king or any other ruler is to make sure that he gets whatever he wants at the expense of the rights of everybody else. You have amongst the kings, those that were the Muslim kings, those who had decency and tried to fulfill the rights of the people, such as Umar bin Abdul Aziz, in other places Mahmud Ghaznavi, the various other kings that were decent kings. And this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised those kings that have decency. He never praised the tyrant, which is what we see all around us now. Nothing but tyrants. So, and how do we know whose rights are what? Other than through the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But how to implement those rights, we see through the lives of the Khulfa Rashideen. We look at, the steps that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu took to safeguard the people, to safeguard Islam, waging war against those who were violating the rights of the people. We see the same thing in the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. We see the same thing in the Khilafah of Uthman radiallahu anhu, the same thing in the Khilafah of Ali radiallahu anhu, except the big distinction is that in the Khilafah of Ali radiallahu anhu, you don't have any wars that are being fought against those people who don't claim to be Muslim. Everyone who fought claimed to be Muslim. Okay. There were those who, and we've gone over this so many times, but I'm going to say it again, there were those who were truly Muslims, and not just any Muslims, those Muslims who were very, whose status amongst Islam and the Muslims and in front of us, or whose status, with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is very high. But we also see their attitudes when Ali, when they fought the army of Ali, and as soon as they understood the situation completely, then they all backed off their position and accepted Ali. Then we had those who were still Muslims, but they insisted on their position, which is what we see in Siffin. And then we have those who deviated, like in Nahwan, who Ali radiallahu anhu just went with the intention of just wiping them out. And then we see the same thing in the 6 months of the Khilafah of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So, again, Khilafah is not rule or leadership. Khilafah is representing, someone before you. And this is what we also see in the Salasil, in these various spiritual chains, where, when one person passes, he leaves someone in his place as his representative, or sometimes multiple people in his place as his representative to continue the mission and, make the message move forward. So again, the point here being, Khilafah is not ruling. Khilafah is ruling in a specific manner. And we look at the lives of the Khulafai Rashidin, you know, they did not become wealthy by taking that position, even though they ruled, you know, a third of the known world. In fact, they lost, from a worldly standpoint, they lost money because they spent what they had in the cause. Living in simple houses, wearing simple clothes, eating simple food, going hungry, making sure that everybody else was fed, and making sure that everybody else's rights were fulfilled. This is, you know, the exact opposite of what we're seeing now, the exact opposite of what's been going on for hundreds of years. Because there has not been a khilafah of that status, or a khilafah. The khilafah batina, the hidden khilafah, continues, but the purpose of the hidden khilafah is to make sure that the spiritual health of the people is good. The purpose of the obvious, or the khilafah zahir, the obvious khilafah, is again for making sure everybody's rights physically and spiritually are fulfilled. Okay? Any questions on that? So this is important point when Imam Hassan al-Islam is laying out these conditions, that on these conditions I will hand over the rule to you. And again, the first is Quran and the Sunnah and the Khulafai Rashidin. Many people mention the Quran and the Sunnah and they forget this other part, but the other part is so significant because again, the Khulafai Rashidin are showing you how to implement what is in the Quran and the Sunnah, as far as from a governmental standpoint. Okay. Second condition, which he compromised on, which Imam Hassan al-Islam compromised on, was that the cursing of Ali has to stop. After the martyrdom of Sayyidina Uthman, radiallahu anhu, you have those who are from Banu Umayyah. Banu Umayyah, to make this clear, you know, even before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you had two major clans in Quraysh. You had Banu Hashim, which is the clan that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is from. And then you had Banu Umayyah. And like 4 generations up, they actually meet. At Abd Manaf, you know, the chain becomes the same. They were rivals as far as, you know, even before Islam, they were rivals, you know, of each other as far as making sure that the pilgrims were fed, you know, looking after the Kaaba, doing all of these things. And rivals within the society. And within Quraysh, you had either other smaller clans either aligning themselves with Banu Umayyah or aligning themselves with Banu Hashim. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, when he declares his message, with the exception of very few, most of Banu Umayyah, because he's from the rival clan, rejected him. The biggest exception of this is, of course, Uthman, radiallahu anhu, who is from Banu Umayyah. And then you had a few others. And this was the issue, and of course, like Abu Jahl, he's not from Banu Umayyah, but he was aligned with Banu Umayyah. And this is one of the reasons why he didn't accept Islam. His statement was that, you know, that we have competed with Banu Hashim in everything. Feeding the pilgrims, watering the pilgrims, you know, taking care of the Kaaba, doing all of these things. We've competed with them in everything. And now they have a prophet. How can we compete with this? You know, they weren't. That was one thing about Quraysh. They had a certain code and they didn't put out outright lies. So none of them was going to declare themselves a prophet unless he truly believed he was a prophet. Okay? And this is what he's saying. He said, we can't compete with that. So if we can't compete with it, I'm not accepting him. This was his arrogance. Just like Shaitan. You know, even though he knows who Adam al-Islam is, he knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this order to prostrate to him, but he said, I'm not doing this. He had no problem prostrating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but when the order came to prostrate to Adam al-Islam, he said, I'm not doing it, because his ego. He acknowledges Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than himself, but he's not willing to acknowledge Adam al-Islam is greater than himself, which is the command, which is a gift from Allah. Same thing here with Abu Jahl, because people say, well, if he knew, then why didn't he accept? They say this all the time, even he say, oh, you know, this scholar, you know, he knows this, you know, how can he be wrong? Well, you know, because in their mind, you know, he's such a great scholar, if you know, he would have accepted it. No, ego gets into play all the time. Okay. So when Uthman radiallahu anhu is martyred, Ali radiallahu anhu's statement, because there was no clear murderer. There was no one who said, okay, this is definitely the one who murdered him. And you cannot in Islam do collective punishment. You know, Islam said no collective punishment 1400 years ago. Geneva Convention was just recent. So, you know, Islam had said, you know, that collective punishment is immoral 1400 years ago. Now they say it's immoral, but they still do it. And they always justify it. But in Islam, there is no collective punishment. So even because people were associated with the group that killed Uthman, he couldn't just go and say, okay, I'm just killing everybody here. So there's no clear cut. So he said, I can't take revenge of Uthman until I know, and I can't investigate it properly until there is peace within the Ummah. Because immediately after the murder of Uthman, you have all of these riots breaking out everywhere, perpetrated by the ones who were involved in his murder. And then these same people that infiltrate the army of Ali and infiltrate the army of Muawiyah at the same time. And because their whole objective is to create turmoil and unrest. So when when Ali says, I can't take, the word that spread is, oh, he refuses to take the revenge for the murder of Uthman. So then what Banu Umayyah does, because again, Uthman was from Banu Umayyah, even though they had tried to kill him themselves in the early days of Islam. His uncle literally wrapped him up in a carpet and lit it on fire on both ends. Abu Bakr is the one who came and saved him. So they themselves are the ones who are trying to kill him. But now they're using this against Ali, saying, oh, see, he refuses to take blood for blood. And so they start, and it became policy that from the minbar, part of the Jummah khutbah, was to curse him. And curse him here wasn't simply to say, oh, you know, he shouldn't be doing this, or to criticize his policies. Cursing was literally cursing him. And for those and because there are these guys today who try to put paint it with some, I guess, rainbow-colored paintbrush, make it look nice, saying, "Oh no, it wasn't. They weren't doing this. They were doing. They were just criticizing his policies. Like one politician criticizes another politician. Well, he wasn't a politician to begin with, but if you read the hadith in Sahih Muslim, it clearly uses the word sabt, and then they try to twist that. But then you have other hadiths which clearly use the word lana, which means to curse. If I say lana on somebody, that's like, that's condemning them. And basically saying that Allah's blessings be taken away from you. It's one of the, in Arabic, this is like one of the strongest forms of cursing somebody.
You mean la'nat?
La'nat, yes. Yes. So the hadith in Sahih Muslim clearly uses that word, that this is what they were doing. So they were doing this, again, part of the Jummah khutbah. It wasn't until Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahmatullahi alayhi, decades later, that he took this out, and in the second part of the khutbah where we say, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl wal ihsan, we recite that verse. That part was designated for the cursing of Ali. And so he said this has to stop. Imam Hassan al-Islam says this has to stop. And so Muawiyah radiallahu anhu said, look, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for everybody else. So Imam Hassan al-Islam accepts that. And he says, fine, we move on. One of the other conditions, which is a simple one to understand, he said that there will be no retaliation or retribution against the Shi'ani Ali or Shi'ani Hassan. So Shia here means group, the supporters of, not Shia and Sunni like today. Because the followers of Imam Hassan al-Islam are Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So he says there's not going to be, you can't, use their support for me or for my father against them. There can't be any retaliation against them. And they said, okay, we agree with this. Which again is also the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because here when Imam Hassan is making peace with them, with Muawiyah radiallahu, then that is understood that everybody who is supporting him is part of this peace. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he conquers Makkah, what does he do? He gives everybody amnesty. To the extent that he says anyone who seeks refuge in the house of Abu Sufyan or the house of Abu Jahl or the house of all these people that were his enemies, he says anyone who seeks refuge is safe. So this again is what Imam Hassan al-Islam is specifying. No retribution. This has to end right now. This is it. Fourth condition is that the governors appointed, or the governors or generals or leaders appointed by Muawiyah radiallahu will have no authority over the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if one of their governors orders Imam Hassan al-Islam to do anything, it's up to him whether he accepts to do it or not. Or if they order Imam Hussein al-Islam to do anything, it's up to him whether he accepts it or not, or their progeny. And this is very important to understand here also. Because there are those who say, that Imam Hassan al-Islam, he took bay'ah with, or gave allegiance to Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Well, first issue with that becomes, well, who gave him power? How did Muawiyah radiallahu anhu get power? Who gave it to him? So the one giving the power is in a superior position. If I go and take it, then okay, then I have the superior position, which is not what's going on here. The army of Imam Hassan al-Islam would have overwhelmed the army of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, but there would have been much bloodshed. And to avoid that bloodshed, Imam Hassan al-Islam said, I prefer peace, over the shedding of the blood of the believers. He was not handing over power from a position of weakness. He was handing over his rights from a position of strength. So that's one point here. The other point is, like when I give allegiance, like, if I give allegiance to a ruler, or if I give allegiance to my sheikh, the one that's being given the allegiance, the one who's taking the allegiance, is the one who specifies the conditions. So when I give allegiance to my sheikh, he says that, you will love Allah and His Messenger, you will honor the Ahlul Bayt, you will make your salat on time, you will, give zakat, you will do all of these things. And me, as the one taking, or giving my allegiance to him, yes, I will do this, yes, I will do this, yes, I will do this. Who's laying out the conditions, and who's accepting the conditions? Imam Hassan al-Islam is the one laying out the conditions. You will do this, you will do this, you will do this. Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu is the one who's saying, yes, I will accept this, I accept this, I accept this. Yeah. But this one that we're talking about right now, where he says that we're not obligated to fulfill any commands from your appointees, also proves that point again. And we have to understand here, Imam Hassan al-Islam is doing all of this for the safeguarding the blood of the believers. And we see today the so-called Muslim leaders who have no problem taking the blood of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of believers, just to protect their position, just to stay on their seat. And then they want to say that, we are the leaders of the Muslims, we are the safeguardian, we are the guardians of the holy places, we are this and we are that. They are nothing but the enemies of Allah and His Messenger, the enemies of the believer. So, the last condition was that after you, if anything happens to you, then rule will go back. The control of who will be the next ruler will go back to the Shura, will come back to Imam Hassan al-Islam, and Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu had no authority to appoint anyone as his heir. And all of these were accepted. Imam Hassan al-Islam, as I mentioned last week, even asked, because Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu sent two people, both named Abdul Rahman, from Quraysh, who were companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were companions of the later generations. So they were companions, and they are still honored as companions, but they were not. They accepted Islam after Fatih Makkah. So they don't have the same status as those companions who came before. This isn't me saying this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran. So he asked them, who will honor or who will guarantee that these conditions will be fulfilled? And the two of them said that we are the guarantors, or how do you say that? Yeah. Guarantors of these conditions. And I'm going to get to this later. I'm going to mention this now. And I've mentioned it before, and we've talked about this before as well. Is that if you look at all of these conditions, they were not met. They were not fulfilled, and especially the last one. That does not exclude Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu from being a Muslim. And he is still Sahabi. That does not exclude him from being Sahabi. Because the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are not innocent. but they are mahfuz, they are protected. And they had their shortcomings. And because of various shortcomings, various aspects of this agreement were not fulfilled. And we'll get into that as we go forward. But again, Imam Hassan al-Islam laid out the conditions, and Muawiyah accepted the conditions. And after the conditions were laid out, Imam Hassan al-Islam, he goes before his army, before his men, who have all taken allegiance with him. And he gives this khutbah in front of them, this sermon in front of them, or to them. And it's mentioned in Ibn Hajar Haythami mentions this, and various other Sunni books. And he says that, Muawiyah fought me over something that was my right and not his right. And he's saying this in, clear terms. He said, this was my right, not his right. But he says that, he specifies, he says that, that I saw that he was not going to stop, and that the blood of the Muslims would be spilled. And there are people who try to translate like this, I don't like to fight, which is not true. No one likes to fight. But he had no issues fighting for what is right and for the protection of the believers. And here he says, but I preferred not to fight, because I did not want the blood of the believers to be spilled. So he specifies why he's doing this. Not because of anything that he's going to gain, because he knows there's trouble coming for him personally. And after he gives the speech, some of his own men even attack him then. Because he says in that, you gave allegiance to me, that you will fight against who I fight with, and you will make peace with whomever I make peace with, and now I have made peace with Muawiyah, so you too must make peace with him. But still some of his men attacked him. And then eventually, he's rescued from there, and eventually makes his way back to Medina Munawwara. But things are not easy for him, and that's the important point to understand, because, and I mentioned this last week, I'll mention this now again. There are a couple of narrations that really get abused, or rather quotes of Imam Hassan al-Islam that really get abused by those who try to detract from the status and the honor of Ahlul Bayt. One is where he said that he states here that wealth came to the house of Abdul Muttalib, and we see what it's done to us. And so they take that statement of his and they say, he was so fond of wealth. He just wanted an easy life, so that's why he gave up the rule. Which is not what he's saying. He's using this in a general sense, as that the wealth has come to the Muslims, and now we see what's happened, which is exactly what happened. When the Muslims were struggling physically and financially, we see what happened. And then when the wealth started coming to that next generation who had never had to struggle for it, they never struggled for the Islam. Islam was handed to them. They never struggled for anything else. All they're seeing are the fruits of the toils of the generation that came before them. And what happens? Easy come, easy go. And this is when you start seeing the civil wars within the Muslims and all of these other issues that came up. And this is what he's talking about. And, you know, so when he returns to Medina Munawwara, and the reason we know that that interpretation of what he said is totally false as far as trying to say that he loved money. This again is the household of Rasulullah. These are the people who had no issues going hungry to make sure that someone else is fed. Allah mentions this in the Quran in Surah Insan, Surah Halata. Yeah, in juz number 29, I think it's surah number 76 or so. Read the whole surah. It's talking about them. You know, we mentioned this also last week. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. That they give, even when they themselves are in need. Hub here means that they themselves need it, but they still give to the poor, the orphans, and the captives. And then the next verse where it says that, you know, they say after they give that, you know, all we look for is wajhullah, the face of Allah, the pleasure of Allah. We don't want anything from you, not even a thank you. Multiple incidences where someone came to the household. This is when he's back in Medina Munawwara, later on, you know, after this treaty, and he comes back to Medina, where people, you know, someone comes and asks for something, and he gives them everything he has, and they go to sleep hungry. Yeah, from our standpoint, you know, we look at him and yeah, like one time person came and asked for 24,000 dirham. He owed creditors, and the creditors were on this man. So he came to Imam Hassan Islam and asked him for a loan. 24,000 dirham. 24,000 dirham, when you do the math on that, 3 dirham by a cow. Dirham or the silver coins. Again, at this time, 3 dirham by a cow, 24 by 3 is what? 8,000. So you can buy 8,000 cows with 24,000 dirham. Cows what? $1,000? 8,000 times 1,000? How many? 8 million bucks? Yeah, $8 million. Yeah, $8 million. That's all he had in the house at the time. He gave it all to him to go and pay off his loans. And then he handed him a sheet which was sealed, and inside the sheet said that it's not a loan, this is a gift. And he goes to sleep hungry. When he comes back to Medina, Marwan is the governor at the time. And we probably need to do a special session just on Marwan. You know, he was really a piece of work. And he's mentioned, and this isn't me saying this, he's mentioned in the Quran. Shajarat al-mal'una, this wretched lineage. And we'll go over that next week, inshallah. But, you know, we'll give all the references there. But Marwan is the governor. And Marwan was like at the front line of cursing Ali and Ahlul Bayt. So part of the khutbah now, even though Ali radhiyallahu anhu has been martyred, you know, months before, this cursing continues. And the cursing would continue for another, so pretty much all of Banu Umayyah. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, as I mentioned, stopped it, but it was only a temporary pause. Most, you know, at that point, most of them had to comply with what he said, but as soon as they martyred him, they reinstated it. Not as strictly as it was before, but at this point now, right now, because of the agreement between Imam Hassan and Muawiyah, it's not being enforced, but you look at all of the appointees, they're all doing it. All all these governors, and Marwan is, like I said, he's at the forefront of all of this. So when Imam Hassan al-Islam comes to the masjid, if you remember, Imam Hassan al-Islam is a replica of Rasulullah from the waist up. Exactly, you look at him, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is narrated. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu one time, Imam Hassan al-Islam, Ali radiallahu anhu was there, Rasulullah is there, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is there, and Ali radiallahu anhu is holding him. I don't remember if Ali radiallahu anhu is holding or Imam Hassan al-Islam is, or Rasulullah is holding Imam Hassan. And Abu Bakr, then he looks at this and he says to Ali, he says, Ali, Hassan doesn't resemble you. He resembles Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can imagine, or unfortunately most of us can't imagine, the emotions that would get going in people who were during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and loved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To see Imam Hassan, and when they're looking at him, feel like they're looking at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, Marwan has to do all this cursing of Ali, and all of the narrations of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in honor of Ali, to the extent that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Whoever curses Ali curses me." He said to Ali radhiallahu anhu, "Jismaka jismi, lahmaka lahmi, damaka dami," that your body is my body, your flesh is, or your flesh is my flesh, and your blood is my blood. So when they would see Imam Hassan al-Islam, it would bring all those emotions and remind them of all of these things, which would of course cause a problem for him, for Marwan and those who are loyal to him. So this is why he also banned Imam Hassan al-Islam from coming to the masjid. And we'll get into that next week, inshallah. Like I said, we'll because to better understand that, we need to better understand Marwan, and I'll go over that next week. Inshallah. I'll end here today with any questions about what we talked about today.
Marwan, what is his name if I want to try to look him up?
Marwan bin Hakam. So, I guess in English, Marwan, bin, B-I-N, bin, and then Hakam. Hakam was his father. H-A-Q-M or K-M, depends on how some people will spell it differently. His father was also a piece of work. And I'll get into that next week. But yeah, look him up. And you're going to find, like anything with Google, you're going to find a lot of different opinions. But look them up, read some stuff, and then, that way when you come next week, I can, some of the stuff when I'm saying it, you'll make those connections. And I'll give the references to the statement of Bibi Aisha Siddiqa about him, which are in Sahih Bukhari, of all places. But these are things that, the lovers of Marwan want to try to hide. Any other questions?
Mahmoud, is there
Yes.
a Marwan? He claimed to be a Muslim also?
Yeah. He didn't just claim to be Muslim. He claimed to be the leader of the Muslims.
Because you say Shadr of Mal'un, that mean a lot.
Yeah. Mal'un is wretched.
Yes.
Wretched. Yeah. And he will. I'm blanking on the surah. I need to look this up. Which surah it's in? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Shajarat al-Mal'una, and Marwan will accuse Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr of being that reference there. The son of Abu Bakr, and he will say that, oh, see, this verse was revealed for him. And Aisha Siddiqa, because her brother will be hiding. I'm just kind of giving an overview of this. Marwan will make an announcement that Yazid needs to be given loyalty to. Bay'ah. He's going to be the king after Muawiyah. And the most verbal one against this was Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr, the son of Abu Bakr. And so, because he makes this statement in the Jummah khutbah, and we need to go over how they did khutbah and stuff, how they, it's
All about power.
yeah, it's all about power and control, and it's amazing. You know, it's a miracle in itself that Islam reached us. That in itself is a miracle. If you start looking at the history and what these people were doing and how they were doing it, and what they tried to do, like they say, the victors write the history. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us that, what He wants to get through gets through. Yeah. Because they tried to change everything, including the Sunnah. So when he accuses her brother, the brother of Aisha Siddiqah, as being the reference to this verse, she will step forward and say, no, this was you. From within her house, she will make this announcement. And people forget, the house that she lived in her whole life is the same house that she lived in with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is the same place that Rasulullah was buried. It's the same place that her father is buried, and it's the same place that Umar radiallahu was buried. She put a partition after he was buried. Before Umar radiallahu passed, if you look the way the graves are laid out, she would enter the house, she slept in that house. This was still where she lived and slept. And made salat. Where Rasulullah is buried. And then when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was buried there, she continued the same thing. So, she would, take off her hijab when she was in the house. When Umar radiallahu anhu was buried there, she put a partition there. Because before it was her husband and then her father. And now Umar radiallahu anhu is ghair mahram. So then she put that partition there. But she's in that same house. Unfortunately for a lot of us, the concept is, after it became, the resting place or the grave of Rasulullah, and then she moved someplace else. No, she continued to live there. And so Abdul Rahman and this house is connected to the masjid. So when Marwan orders the police to arrest him for saying something against him, he runs into the house of his sister, which is the house of Rasulullah. And then from outside, he's yelling because they can't enter her house. It'd be a riot. Because they hadn't gotten the people used to that. They got the people used to the cursing of Ali, but they hadn't gotten people used to, raiding her house. So he knew that. So he starts yelling from the outside, and that's when he accuses him, oh, this is for you. And then she steps, from within, she responds. No, this is for you when you were still in the loins of your father. And then eventually, her brother leaves the house. He has to leave at some point. And they find him in a cave dead. Not long after that. Conveniently.
We don't know how he died.
Yeah. Convenient. Yeah. But yeah, inshallah, I'll go over that more next week. Because it helps to understand who Marwan is, to understand what's going to be coming next, and what Imam Hassan Islam is having to deal with. Because again, for a lot of people most people don't know anything about this, period. But for those, if I take that category of people who do know some rough sketch about this, or rough idea about this, the vast majority of them still don't have any concept of how difficult life was for him. It's simply, he went back to Medina, and, he was fine. And that's not how it was. And he signed off on this knowing, when he handed over the rule, it's not like he didn't know what was going to be coming to him. But he was willing to go through all of these difficulties just to safeguard the blood of the believers. And what's more sad than that is that we don't even know what he did to be able to appreciate what he did. Because again, if he hadn't done what he did, and if his brother hadn't done what he did, there would be no Islam. At least not the Islam that came to Rasulullah, or the Islam that Rasulullah brought. There might be a lot of people claiming to be Muslim, but there would not be, anyone who's connected to that Islam. The same thing like what we're seeing right now, in Gaza. And as we've talked about before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send this religion to Rasulullah, did not send Rasulullah with this religion for it to be erased. Or for the Muslims to be erased. And people have tried to do that over and over. And they'll keep trying to do that over and over, and they've all failed. And like we talked about, when all of this started, when the Mongols came, you look at the Khwarizmian Empire. 2 million people lived in that empire, Muslim empire. 2 million people at that time. When Genghis or Genghis invaded, that population went from 2 million to 200,000. Yet, what is still the dominating religion in that area? Islam. Who are the majority of people in that area? Muslims. When Hulagu or Halaku, ransacked Baghdad, what were the orders? Kill every Muslim. Only leave those that are Christian. And the reason he did that was because his main wife, of the 5 wives he had, his main one was Christian, one he liked the most. And she said, just don't hurt the Christians. So he said, fine. Baghdad. So that was Baghdad, 1258 is when they ransacked it. Today, who are the majority of people in Baghdad? Muslims. The same people that invaded to kill and destroy and finish off Islam were the people that, or rather their next generations, were the ones who became Muslim. But like I said last week, the scary aspect of that is, like we see people becoming Muslim today, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replacing us. So we need to really be making tawbah and really, coming back to Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I'll end here today if there are no other questions. Shall I?
I'm thinking, but
I
I'm
was
always
thinking
thinking.
him too.
Yeah. Yeah, mashallah, these two have good questions all the time.
Dr. Marwan, one question.
Yes.
And Marwan had a son named Abdul Malik.
Marwan had two sons.
One of them Abdul Malik.
Abdul Malik is one of the sons. Abdul Aziz is the other son. So Marwan is also the grandfather of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who is very different.
Very good.
Yes, very good. Just like Shaitan has a great-grandson who is Muslim.
Shaitan, great grandson, Muslim.
Yes, great-grandson is Muslim. Yeah. Yeah, since I said that, I'll end with this, inshallah.
You know that?
One time, and the narrator of this hadith is Umar radiallahu anhu. So one time, Umar radiallahu anhu says, we were sitting with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when this very old man entered the masjid. Very old appearing man, and he comes and he sits with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he starts, talking to him. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells him to introduce himself. So he is Ham bin Him bin Lakis bin Iblis. So Ham bin Him bin Lakis bin Iblis. And then he starts telling his story. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asks him, how old are you? He says, I don't know exactly how old I am, but I just remember that I was a young boy when Habil killed Qabil.
Really early age.
Yeah. So he said, I was a young boy at that time. But then I accepted Islam at the hands of Ibrahim al-Islam. So he met Ibrahim al-Islam and he accepted Islam and he learned from Ibrahim al-Islam. And then he met Musa al-Islam and he learned from him. And then he met Isa al-Islam and he learned from him. And Isa al-Islam told him that you will meet Rasulullah, the last prophet to come, and when you meet him, give him my salam. And so Rasulullah, of course, responded to the salam of Isa al-Salam. And then they spoke for a while, and he takes instructions from Rasulullah, and then he leaves. But this is the great-grandson of Iblis. Yeah. So just because the grandfather or the father or whatever is bad does not mean that the offspring will be.
Otherwise, there would be no Sahaba.
Yeah. If you look at many of the Sahaba, and if you look at their lineage, like even the son of Abu Jahl, Ikrama, radiallahu anhu, he's Muslim. Not only Muslim, he's Sahabi. Amongst the martyrs during the Khilafah of Umar, radiallahu anhu.
Who killed him? Habib?
Cain killed Abel.
I think he said it
So
backwards.
Qabil killed
Habib,
Habil.
that's right.
Yeah.
I think it's the first person got killed down on the earth.
First person to be murdered.
Wow.
Yes. That was the first murder.
Brother, right?
Yes. Two brothers.
One killed the other.
Yes. Over a girl.
Over the-
Yeah. So it hasn't changed even today.
So which one killed the other one?
Qabil killed Habib.
So Habib the one got killed.
Yes.
So what you say in English, Habib got
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll end here today, inshallah. Actually, it's exactly 3 o'clock. I've ended a few times along the way here, so this is it. So,
No
may Allah,
takebacks.
may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, guide us and allow us to understand and fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may He protect our brothers and sisters in Palestine and give them victory over their oppressors. May He protect all Muslims throughout the world and protect our iman. And give us all the death of a martyr and raise us up in a condition where He is pleased with us and we are pleased with Him. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala khayra khalqihi Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatihi ya arhamar rahimin.